The last time anyone saw 19-year-old Janecia Mason, she was getting into a red Chevrolet Monte Carlo on a quiet evening in North Dallas. She had her whole life ahead of her, dreams of becoming a nail technician, a passion for beauty, and a bright future waiting to unfold. But within days, those dreams were shattered. Her body would be discovered under a bridge, lifeless, abandoned, and silenced forever. What happened in those missing hours? And who was responsible for ending her life so brutally? Janecia Nene Mason was young, ambitious, and full of life. Born in Shreveport, Louisiana, she later moved to Bedford-Euless, Texas, where she graduated from Trinity High School in 2022. She had a talent for hair, makeup, and nails, and she planned to turn that passion into a career. But in March 2023, everything changed. She vanished without a trace, last seen in a car with a man nearly 10 years older than her. Days later, the search for her came to a devastating end. A passerby made a gruesome discovery: Janecia's body, discarded beneath a bridge near the Trinity River. She had been shot twice in the head. What led her to that car? Who was the man she was last seen with? And how did detectives piece together the events that led to her final moments? This is the story of Janecia Mason, how she lived, how she was taken, and how justice finally caught up with the man responsible. Before her name made headlines, before investigators pieced together the tragic details of her final moments, Janecia Mason was simply Nene, loved, full of promise, and determined to carve out a future for herself. Janecia was born in Shreveport, Louisiana, a city known for its deep cultural roots, music, and resilience. From an early age, she was drawn to beauty and self-expression. Whether it was styling hair, experimenting with makeup, or perfecting the latest nail designs, she had an eye for creativity. Friends and family recall how she would spend hours practicing on herself and others, always striving to get every detail just right. It wasn't just a hobby for her. It was a dream she intended to turn into a career. As she grew older, life took her to Texas. She and her family moved to Bedford-Euless, a suburban area between Dallas and Fort Worth. It was a fresh start, a place where new opportunities awaited. Janecia attended Trinity High School, where she quickly made a name for herself as a social, outgoing young woman. She had an infectious personality, the kind of presence that made people gravitate toward her. Despite any challenges she faced, she carried herself with confidence, always pushing forward. In 2022, Janecia reached an important milestone: graduation. Like many young people stepping into adulthood, she had big plans. She wasn't interested in following a traditional path. College wasn't her immediate priority. Instead, she wanted to build a career around her passion, nail artistry. She envisioned herself as a successful nail technician, possibly even opening her own salon one day. She was working toward that goal, practicing, perfecting her craft, and looking for ways to support herself in the meantime. But behind the vibrant personality and the ambition was the reality of a young woman navigating life's challenges. The world can be unforgiving, especially for young women trying to find their way. Janecia was no exception. In March 2023, her journey took an unexpected turn. The choices she made, the people she encountered, and the circumstances that followed would lead her down a path she never could have anticipated. A path that ended in tragedy. March 17, 2023, started like any other day for 19-year-old Janecia Mason. But as the sun set over North Dallas, the young woman who had once been so full of life was seen for the last time. What happened next would leave a trail of questions, suspicions, and heartbreak. That evening, Janecia was in North Dallas, a bustling area filled with nightlife, traffic, and people going about their routines. Surveillance cameras picked up her movements as she walked along a stretch of road known for its activity after dark. Then, something happened that would later become a crucial piece of evidence in the investigation. Janecia got into a car. The vehicle was a red Chevrolet Monte Carlo with dark-tinted windows. The driver? A 29-year-old man named Joseph Aparicio. Who was Joseph Aparicio? And why did Janecia get into his car? What is known is that Aparicio was nearly a decade older than Janicia. He had a troubled past, a history of violence that few knew about at the time. He wasn't just another man offering a ride. He was someone with secrets, someone who had already proven he was capable of harm. But Janicia didn't know that. To the outside world, it was just another moment, another young woman stepping into a car on a busy street. No one knew that this simple act would be the beginning of a nightmare. For the next 4 days, Janicia's family and friends wouldn't hear from her. Calls and messages went unanswered. The silence was unsettling. Something wasn't right. And then, on the morning of March 23, 2023, everything changed. A call to 911 would reveal the tragic fate of Janicia Mason. For 6 days, Janicia Mason's whereabouts remained unknown. Her phone was silent. No social media updates. No calls to family or friends. She had simply vanished. During those days, no one knew that while her loved ones waited for answers, the truth about what had happened to her was hidden in the most unexpected place, beneath a bridge in Fort Worth, Texas. Investigators would later piece together what happened in the early morning hours of March 21st. Joseph Aparicio, the man last seen with Janicia, was now on the move. But he wasn't driving the red Chevrolet Monte Carlo anymore. Instead, he was behind the wheel of his Jeep Patriot, and he wasn't alone. Inside that vehicle was Janicia's lifeless body. He drove to a secluded area near the Trinity River, a place surrounded by thick brush and abandoned pathways. His destination? 350 Precinct Line Road, a desolate stretch beneath a bridge, a place chosen not by chance, but because it was quiet, hidden, and far from prying eyes. Once there, Aparicio stepped out of the vehicle, opened the passenger side door, and dragged Janicia's body across the dirt. The ground beneath her left a disturbing trail, evidence that would later tell the story of her final moments. Then, without a second thought, he left her there, abandoned, forgotten. 2 days later, at around 9 a.m., a passerby was walking near the bridge at 350 Precinct Line Road when they noticed something unusual. At first, it didn't seem real, just a figure lying in the dirt. But as they stepped closer, the horrifying reality came into focus. A woman was there, naked, motionless. There were marks in the dirt where her body had been dragged. Her long, dark hair spread across the ground, a haunting contrast to the rough terrain. And then, the most chilling detail of all, 2 gunshot wounds to her head. Janicia Mason was dead. The person who found her immediately called 911, and within minutes, law enforcement arrived. Crime scene tape surrounded the area. Officers examined every inch of the scene, searching for evidence that could explain what had happened to her. As they stood there, looking at the young woman whose life had been cut short, one thing was clear. This was no accident. This was execution. But who had done this? And why? At that moment, those answers were still unknown. But it wouldn't take long for detectives to uncover the truth. A truth that would send shockwaves through the community. The discovery of Janicia Mason's body was just the beginning. Now investigators needed to answer the most critical questions. Who was responsible? How did she end up here? And what evidence would lead them to the killer? The investigation moved quickly. The crime scene provided some initial clues, but detectives needed more, something that would directly tie a suspect to the crime. One of the first steps investigators took was analyzing cell phone data. Every phone leaves a digital footprint, connecting to nearby towers and recording movement. Janicia's phone was no exception. When they pulled her records, they found that her phone had last pinged in North Dallas on March 17th, the night she was last seen. Then, the signal went dead. But that wasn't the only piece of evidence. Investigators also checked traffic and business surveillance cameras in the area where Janicia was last spotted. That's when they found something critical. A red Chevrolet Monte Carlo. The same one Janicia had been seen entering that night. Frame by frame, investigators tracked the vehicle's movements. It became clear that this car held the key to Janicia's disappearance. But who was driving it? With the car identified, detectives ran a search of public records, checking vehicle registrations, prior traffic stops, and ownership records. Soon, they had a match. The red Chevrolet Monte Carlo belonged to 29-year-old Joseph Aparicio. Aparicio lived in Haltom City, Texas, a short drive from where Janicia's body had been found. But finding out who he was wasn't enough. Investigators needed more evidence, something that placed Janicia inside his vehicle and inside his home. As detectives dug deeper, they began speaking to potential witnesses, people who may have seen Janicia the night she disappeared or who had information on Aparicio. Some witnesses confirmed seeing Janicia in North Dallas that night. Others remembered spotting the red Monte Carlo in the area. It was becoming harder for Aparicio to explain away his involvement. Then, detectives got a break. A witness told them that Aparicio had recently been seen driving a different car, a Jeep Patriot, the same vehicle that had been used to transport Janicia's body to the Trinity River. It was enough for authorities to take the next step. With mounting evidence, police obtained a search warrant for Aparicio's residence in Haltom City. When they arrived, they were looking for anything that could connect him to Janicia's murder. They didn't have to search long. Inside his bedroom, officers found something chilling. Clothing matching what Janicia was last seen wearing. Even more damning was what they found when they searched his vehicle. A forensic team swabbed the front passenger seat, testing for biological evidence. The results? Blood. It was undeniable. Janicia had been inside Aparicio's car, and the presence of blood suggested she had been injured, or worse, while in that vehicle. With cell phone records, surveillance footage, witness statements, and now physical evidence tying Aparicio to the crime, detectives had what they needed. The man behind Janicia Mason's murder had been found. But the investigation wasn't over. Because as authorities dug even deeper, they made another horrifying discovery. Joseph Aparicio had done this before. As the evidence stacked against Joseph Aparicio, law enforcement knew it was only a matter of time before they closed in on him. They had surveillance footage, phone records, forensic evidence, and witness statements, each piece of the puzzle confirming the same chilling truth. Aparicio was responsible for the murder of Janicia Mason. Now, they had to bring him in. Authorities secured an arrest warrant for Aparicio, and on March 30th, 2023, they moved in. SWAT officers and detectives arrived at his home in Haltom City, Texas, just before sunrise. They surrounded the property, ensuring no escape. Then, with weapons drawn, they made their way inside. Aparicio was there. He didn't resist. He didn't run. It was as if he knew this moment was coming. As officers placed him in handcuffs, they read him his rights. But there was no emotion on his face. No fear. No regret. The man who had violently ended Janicia's life, and possibly others, was finally in custody. Once in police custody, Aparicio was formally charged with the murder of Janicia Mason. But as detectives continued to investigate, they uncovered something even more disturbing. His DNA was a match to an unsolved murder from 2022, the killing of 29-year-old Chloe Darnell in Carrollton, Texas. And then there was another case. Aparicio was also linked to a November 22, 2021, aggravated assault in Dallas, where he had stabbed a woman 13 times. Miraculously, she had survived. But her attack had remained unresolved until now. With each discovery, the full picture of Aparicio's crimes became clearer. Janicia's murder wasn't an isolated act. It was part of a pattern. The charges against him now included first-degree murder of Janicia Mason, first-degree murder of Chloe Darnell, aggravated assault for the 2021 stabbing victim. With such overwhelming evidence, prosecutors built a solid case against Aparicio. His phone data, DNA, surveillance footage, and the incriminating evidence found in his home left no room for doubt. In the months leading up to trial, his defense team attempted to negotiate, but the prosecution refused to back down. The families of the victims wanted justice, and the community demanded accountability. Aparicio's fate was sealed. But how long would he spend behind bars? That answer would come on February 7, 2025, when he finally stood before the court to face his punishment. The courtroom was silent as the judge entered, the weight of the case heavy in the air. family members of the victims filled the seats, their faces a mixture of grief and anticipation. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the moment when justice would finally be served. Joseph Aparicio sat motionless, his expression unreadable. After nearly 2 years of investigations, mounting evidence, and legal battles, there was little room for doubt. The prosecution was prepared to present a case so airtight that there would be no escape. But Aparicio made a decision that took many by surprise. He would not fight. On February 7, 2025, Joseph Aparicio pleaded guilty to the murders of Janicia Mason and Chloe Darnell. His admission of guilt meant there would be no drawn-out trial, no emotional testimonies from witnesses, no need for the jury to deliberate. Instead, the courtroom turned its focus to sentencing. As the prosecution recounted the horrific details of Janicia's final moments, her mother sat in the front row, clutching a tissue, her eyes never leaving the man responsible for her daughter's death. The judge listened intently as the defense made a brief statement, acknowledging Aparicio's plea but offering little in the way of justification. There was no argument for leniency. The crimes spoke for themselves. When the judge finally delivered the sentence, the room felt frozen in time. Aparicio was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Janicia Mason. Then, the court announced a second life sentence for the murder of Chloe Darnell. The sentences would run concurrently, ensuring he would never walk free again. The weight of the ruling settled over the courtroom. For Janicia's family, it was a bittersweet moment. No amount of justice could bring her back, but at least they knew that the man who had taken her life would never have the chance to hurt anyone else. As Aparicio was led out of the courtroom, he remained emotionless, offering no words, no remorse. But for the families left behind, this day marked the end of a nightmare and the beginning of a long journey toward healing. The impact of Janicia Mason's murder rippled far beyond the walls of the courtroom. Her family, friends, and the community that had watched her grow were left grappling with a loss that could never be undone. For her mother, Barbara Taylor, the grief was overwhelming. She had lost not just a daughter, but a young woman full of promise, ambition, and dreams that would never be realized. In the days following the sentencing, she spoke out, her words carrying the weight of a mother's pain. She described Janicia as a vibrant soul, someone who brought joy to those around her, someone who should still be here. But now, all that remained were memories. The community in Bedford-Euless rallied around Janicia's family, determined to ensure that her name would not be forgotten. At Trinity High School, where she had graduated just a year before her death, a balloon release was held in her honor. Dozens gathered, holding brightly colored balloons, each one representing a piece of the love and sorrow they carried for her. As the balloons floated upward into the sky, a hush fell over the crowd. It was a moment of reflection, of remembrance, of heartbreak. But it was also a moment of unity, a symbol that Janicia's life, though tragically cut short, had left an undeniable mark. Back in Shreveport, Louisiana, where Janicia had been born, her funeral was held among the family and friends who had known her since childhood. The service was emotional, filled with both sorrow and celebration of the life she had lived. Her family leaned on one another for strength, drawing from their faith to navigate the unimaginable pain of burying someone so young. Barbara Taylor spoke about the difficult road ahead, about the hole left in their family that could never be filled. But she also spoke about resilience, about holding onto love, about finding a way to honor Janicia's memory through their own strength. For those closest to her, the grief would never fully fade, but they held onto the belief that justice had been served and that Janicia's story would continue to be a reminder of the dangers that lurk in the shadows and the importance of never forgetting the lives lost too soon. The case of Janicia Mason serves as a harsh reminder of the dangers faced by vulnerable individuals, particularly young women who find themselves in difficult circumstances. Janicia had dreams, aspirations, and a future she was striving to build, but like so many others, she became a target for someone who saw her not as a person, but as an opportunity to exploit and destroy. Her story is not unique. Across the country, countless women face similar risks, often with little protection or support. Law enforcement played a crucial role in bringing Janicia's killer to justice, using every available tool to piece together what had happened to her. Surveillance footage, cell phone data, and forensic evidence all worked together to ensure that Joseph Aparicio could not escape accountability. But beyond the investigative work, this case also highlighted the importance of the community's involvement. It was the collective effort of witnesses, detectives, and those who refused to let her case go unanswered that ensured justice was served. Without that determination, her killer might have remained free, capable of striking again. Looking back at Janicia's story, there are lessons to be learned, lessons about awareness, about looking out for one another, about creating stronger protections for those at risk. Preventive measures, such as better resources for young women in vulnerable situations and stronger community vigilance, could make a difference in stopping these tragedies before they happen. Janicia's life was taken far too soon, but if her story sparks conversations, if it encourages even one person to be more cautious or to reach out for help, then her legacy will not just be one of tragedy, but of change. Janicia Mason's story is heartbreaking, but it's not just a story. It's a reality that too many people face. Vulnerable individuals need support, protection, and resources to help them escape dangerous situations before it's too late. If you want to make a difference, consider supporting organizations that provide aid to at-risk women and those in need of safety and assistance. Now, we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe enough is being done to protect vulnerable individuals? Share your opinions in the comments below. Your voice matters. If you found this story important, don't forget to like this video, share it to spread awareness, and subscribe for more true crime stories that need to be heard. Together, we can keep these stories alive and push for the justice every victim deserves.